So we lost our studio for the time being. It was kind of a big story in Great Falls that had to do with an apartment building fire. And of course, we were directly affected by that because we had a school break and we had some time off. So of course that had to be part of our life.
There's no rest for the wicked ever.
So Kevin's oldest son had to move back in with us for the time being.
Love the boy.
We spookified the room and everything, and now we're
spookifying back out here.
Yeah, now I had to spookify out here. What were some of your favorite scary movies growing up?
Gremlins.
Oh yeah, we talked about that one.
Gremlins and, well, Jaws never fit in really Halloween, but that's
still a scary movie.
That thing scared the dickens out of me. I wouldn't go on Lake Erie.
Scared the dickens out of a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I watched Jason. Jason was pretty good. Poltergeists were huge.
Poltergeist is a really good one.
Yeah.
I wonder if he could handle that one too.
Most kids these days, do you think they'd be able to handle like a poltergeist since they're so attached to TVs? I mean,
it might scare them from the TV.
Yeah, they get
which might be a good thing.
Sucked into that thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she's gone.
Yeah, Poltergeist actually was probably one of my first two, along with Gremlins. I was a teenager and watching The Shining that was it. So good.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
Deliverance was good.
I don't think I have seen all of Deliverance. I know what it's about, and obviously I've seen the banjo scene.
Yep, it does get you in the middle, but you got to wait it out.
Like with most you do, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, drags a little bit.
Okay. So we got to get our scary movie lineup going.
Yes.
I'd like to see some that I haven't seen before, but it has been a while since I watched
Didn't
The
we
Shining.
try to
so
do this? We tried to do this already, didn't we? Try to do that already.
Yeah, we try and do it every year, and then we get busy, and then hockey's on, so forget it. And anybody else trying to watch TV in this house, like, forget it. It's not going to happen.
Hockey's very important.
I know. To this household it is.
Yes.
Or at least to you.
Well,
go Toronto.
Go. No.
Hey, but Utah's got a team now.
Yep, I picked them for the Stanley Cup win.
Ooh, so
to go to the playoffs.
We'll be tracking that.
Yep. I'm going to do what other people do, what Steve does, my best bud. And he just picked the Knights the first year they came out and they went to the Cup. So I figured it might work for me. I haven't.
Probably not.
Yeah. Still got the Rangers.
This will be the year the Sabres go to the Cup.
Sorry, I haven't picked Sabres in a long time. Rick Jenneret was, and all those guys are gone.
Welcome to the Teacher's Curse podcast. I'm Annie.
And I'm Kevin.
And we're the Leather Barrows.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, I really want to do a deep dive into this topic that we've been talking about for the past couple days that has to do with school boards and, how our structure of school boards and school board elections have affected our school system as a whole. I have an article. Okay, so there was an article that I wanted to talk about. It is called Education Democracy versus Education Freedom. And it's from the Frontier Institute. And it opens with, most taxpayers agree that paying for young citizens' education constitutes a common good, worthy of public funding. Where we tend to disagree as a society is when we ask who should provide the publicly funded education. So right off the bat, when I was reading this, that really grabbed me because we are constantly talking about how when something is coming from taxing, that it should be based on the common good.
Yes.
If you're going to do that. So it's not that people disagree that educating the children of the community is not good and should not be funded. Everybody is agreeing with that. It's just a matter of who is then providing that.
Right.
And how is the funding, who's deciding how the funding is being spent.
Right. And those are a lot of big questions.
Yes. So it includes Neil McCluskey, who is the director of the Cato Center for Educational Freedom, Ted Kolderie, who is the chairman of the Minnesota Association of Charter Schools. And then it also quotes Milton Friedman, who is a historic statistician, and who also won the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences in 1976. And I see quotes from him quite frequently, especially in the circles that we run in.
Here's what was enjoyable about this. The writing is fantastic. I mean, this is what an article is supposed to look like.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just beautiful.
It's really short, and it's to the point, and it doesn't tell you what to think, but it just asks you questions and gives it back to you, which I love in an article. So the first thing that I kind of wanted to hit on was McCluskey's perspective is that the American education system relies heavily on government-controlled structures. And what he means by that are district lines. So whatever house you happen to live in determines which school you are going to.
Yeah.
As if all schools are treated the same.
Right.
Which we know, everybody out there knows, is not the case whatsoever.
No.
And then just different compulsory laws. So what needs to be taught in the classroom?
Mm-hmm.
What are the requirements for education to be considered completed?
Right.
And because of this, we give the government undue influence over children's education, which runs counter to American values of freedom and independence from government control.
Right.
So what are kind of your initial thoughts on that? And you have run for school board in the past.
Right.
And then our friend who we'll bring on later, I'm sure, to talk about this topic, has. And what are the problems that you've heard about when you were running?
Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm.
What were the problems that you were hearing about?
Oh gosh, we were in COVID, man. So it was all the rights of the kids not wearing masks. It was all of that. So that was really pinpointed on it, it was good for them because they didn't show what they really were doing in the schools, what their achievement rates were actually at before. So during that race, that's what it was. It was about a lot of individual rights, which is crazy. Because they don't have individual rights. With our boards, we don't have choice. We don't have any of that. And it was the first time that they actually got to see that, I think. And then other situations happened where they wanted to know what was being done in schools, what was being taught in schools. Right. So during that race, that's exactly what that was all about. But because of such a big pickup in the freedom movement of masking and all that other stuff, they were able to squeak her in. So that was the big issues there, which it goes along with this because it's freedom, right?
Yeah.
We don't have freedom of choice in schools.
Yeah. So I want to pause you right there. So Neil McCluskey in the article is quoted as saying, "The American school system is one in which the government determines where, how, and what children will learn. Essentially, how their very minds will be formed." End quote. Clearly, this does not seem very American. And the thought that came to my head when I was reading this was Pink Floyd's The Wall.
Yeah, another brick in the wall.
Right. And how, obviously, I love that song. It's so hard as an educator.
Yeah.
Right? When you're listening to the song, because we have both been in the situation where we're like against education in all realms of it, that it's just institutionalizing and this, that, and the other.
It is. But
it is
institutionalizing.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's what that made me think of, because we're constantly in this fight against ourselves as educators of how far do we demand compliance before we allow them to have freedom.
Right.
And be those free thinking
right.
individuals. Because if you allow that freedom to happen too early before they have knowledge of respect for one another and right. how that's supposed to form, then you get a mess on your hands. So that thought just was interesting to me, because also government schools are not, in the grand scheme of things, are not old. right? They're a fairly new idea.
No, yeah, it's a fairly new idea, for sure. But it's the whole time you're talking about this. We have seen the academies, so it's not hard to give school choice and put it in a town like, let's say, Great Falls or any other Missoulas or Bozeman's or anything else like that. And I think about when you said, when there's a point where kids move in different cognitive levels, right? And so if a parent wants a school that's open that's an academy, right? You wear the uniform, you wear, you have pride. They teach you a whole bunch of other different morals and a whole bunch of, different ethics and things of that nature. And it's in their charter and the parent picks that. The thing is that one would be great here is farming and trade school, charter school, and
one that's focused on agriculture.
And agriculture.
Yeah, there's a lot of different routes you could take for a charter
And they
school
have
here.
all of their individual boards. They can keep their public school board how they want. So we don't have that freedom at all. And we've seen these schools, flourish and bypass public education or run right with it. It has great competition to those. And sometimes it evens it out. It takes a new charter state to about 5 years before we can see really what it's growing inside of that. And you have your own board there. They should be of parents that are vested. And I'm finding out that you call those stakeholders because we're all a stakeholder.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. So we only have the illusion of freedom. Families only have the illusion of freedom under the current system.
Yep.
But yes, it is interesting that parents are technically stakeholders.
Yes, they are.
In the public school district. I don't think they are treated as such, though.
No, they're not. Especially with the stories, you get to hear. Actually, just go to one and ask to go see your child.
Yeah.
Just say, hey, can I have a pass? I'm going to go.
Can I
what class
observe
is
my kid in the classroom for a day? Yeah.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, it's difficult to do
I see
that.
safety issues, but I mean, at the same point, the parent. There's no real risk.
Circle back around to school boards.
Okay.
And how we kind of get stuck in this entrenchment of the system, I guess, is how I want to say that.
In the tunnel.
Yeah. Vladimir Kogan, who is from Ohio State University, talked about how during school board elections, generally they're not in general elections. And we've seen sometimes they're kind of in their own cycle.
Right.
But usually only 10% of the normal voter turnout is participating in these elections. So already the public school district is not getting the perspective of a majority of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be for a lot of reasons. Either they don't know about it. He says in here, like, most people don't even know who's running for school board.
Right.
Or anything about them.
And the power that they have. Oh, my goodness, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they have...
Thinking that it just doesn't matter.
Right. And they're going to make the right decisions every time.
Yeah.
That used to be okay, and I think we talked about this because when we had a prosperous society, 80s, before that, things like that, and this system started kicking gear, there was a lot of PTAs, moms could go, there's a lot of involvement. Kids did not fall to, there's one school here that is 12% proficient in like reading. Don't quote me on that. Maybe give me 5 points either way, would you? But that whole thing of, if you don't have something that is being funded through the taxpayers and they're thriving, that's what you get, and they're forced into it.
Yeah, I think what you're meaning, if you are a taxpayer, and therefore a stakeholder,
mm-hmm.
and you are not involving yourself in making sure that these people are being held accountable, then this is what's going to happen. We're
They're
then
going to fail.
literacy falls. Yes.
Math falls.
Yes.
All of that falls.
Yes. And it can't be pinpointed to any one person that's who is at fault.
No.
But in my perspective, especially after reading this article, it was like a lot of it does fall on the school board because that is the governing body.
Yeah, they're in charge of, I do believe, the hiring and the firing and the signing and doing all that other stuff.
And they're the ones who are choosing the curriculum that goes in.
Yep.
And deciding what programs to implement. And
Mm-hmm.
if their focus is not on, we need to make sure that our kids are literate.
Right.
Then what is the point?
Right.
Well, what are we doing then?
It's neglect. We've talked about that word, and it's a strong word,
Educational neglect.
but educational neglect.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not saying that it wasn't done in good faith, right? It wasn't, everybody can have their conspiracy that this drop off of even before COVID and the way these schools have fallen, is everybody has those good intentions. I don't think that there's bad intentions.
I believe everybody gets involved in education with good intentions.
With good intentions. And you walk into that with open eyes and shock at the same time.
Because if you get into education, but you are not a person who's open to criticism, and you are not able to look at things objectively,
yeah,
and you just want to think about it as, because I'm passionate about it, therefore I excel at it. Yeah. Therefore, the kids aren't failing because it's something I'm doing. If you can't do that, then we cannot educate.
Right. And that's why I always argued that teachers should be 30 and above.
Right. To have the life experience to back it.
To have the life experience to back it.
I remember you saying that to me. And
you were offended at me.
I was,
you were like,
because I
"Shut
was
up,
a young
asshole.
20-something,
Shut
and I
up."
was like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
And now as a mid-30-something,
Yeah.
I go, oh my gosh, it would have been, my whole teaching career would have been so much easier
Yep.
had I had life experience behind me to guide these kids through.
Yeah, and I don't know if the states thought that through, because in many states you need a master's degree, so you have to go another 4 years, so you're doing 6 years of college, so you're like 26, 27 years old if you go straight through. But
yeah, and that's even if you're just getting a licensure without the master's program, you're still in that long.
Yeah, true.
Which is why
True.
I said, gosh, if I'm going to go back to school for another year and a half, 2 years, I'm coming out with a master's.
Right.
I'm not just coming out with a bachelor's and a licensure to back it.
Right.
Which
is another fault.
Yes.
Right. I would like to see, do the school boards have any, they do the hiring. So they're given so much power, but the state superintendent really doesn't have any power. Does everybody know that?
It doesn't seem to.
They don't have any,
I believe they're supposed to have some sort of budgetary oversight, which we can talk about in another episode.
But that's part of the school boards all the way down. If you look at who's the major leader, who's the leader of the state, right? I mean,
so were you bringing that up because you're wondering if districts have the power to set licensure demands and requirements? I believe they do.
So, they cry that they have a teacher shortage, but they can really scrap the books and possibly rewrite some things for inviting teachers.
Yeah.
I'm going to look into that more.
Yeah.
I'm going to look into that.
I would, and I don't think they're using their provisional licenses either. It doesn't
not appropriately.
Seem to be,
no, they're not using.
Like they're not using that as an advantage to bring in more teachers.
No.
Let's see. One other thing on this one. Oh, I wanted to talk about what Milton Friedman said. So Milton Friedman argued that separating the funding of education from the provider would better meet diverse educational preferences. So this is another thing that is huge on our hearts and personally, but also within the community as a whole. There's a lot of diverse educational needs, especially in this day and age, that I don't think can be fully provided by any school district.
No.
Even if they're fully funded.
Look at the support in Salt Lake City, in Utah, outside programming. I mean, the kids would come back into our classrooms and they'd come back from their whatever, and they were readily available for those. And it takes a community to build a community and run a community, and that's just
even the schools that are built for it still need outside support.
Yeah, absolutely.
And parent support and all of these things. But that's in a charter system.
I know.
Right? So parents automatically have more power in that kind of setting.
They're on the boards.
Parents actually serve on the boards, which is, I think, kind of what they're talking about. Like, we should be governed by the people who are
right,
the true stakeholders.
Why is the state of Montana so afraid of freedom? Liberty. Get rid of freedom. It's overused. Liberty. What? They're so... The state of Montana is so scared that they do a charter school, and the boards are all happy about it. They get them written. They don't get them written correctly, right? And then they get sent back on some of them, and then start a district charter school. All they did was build a school and run and put another name and a sticker on it.
Right.
That's all they did.
I know. I don't know.
And I'm not bashing in those who have picked to do this and whatever, because the school board is responsible for this. They're the ones that okay things like this.
But for the legislature to allow that to happen, which I guess is not a totally odd practice, but it's not used normally.
No.
How do I want to say that? Like, it's not that it's not used in other states. It's just not normally done that way.
We're not trying to, demonize them. We're trying to figure this out and how they, they're right.
But Milton Friedman's argument to me points to kind of the voucher system and trying things that way, where we're actually putting the funding back into the hands of the parents and giving them the power to say, here is where I want that money spent and how I want it spent, instead of on this trust-based system where,
it's trust-based.
I know that my tax dollars are being taken out anyway, so I'm just going to trust that they're doing right by my children. And then they say the common thread in these declarations, so of the three that I was talking about, is the importance of liberty and choice over democracy. Because even though our school boards are democratically elected, we also know that the dark side of democracy is the mob rule.
Right.
So when you have special interest groups that are backing the people who are going for board positions or already on the board, teachers unions or whatever else it might be, then you have that mob rule mentality. And that's very hard to fight against. So do you have more thoughts on that?
No, teachers unions. That's you. Right, we get all the teachers unions on, and here in Montana we have the one, and we have 1.7 million, like we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I bet we could pull up the people who are serving on the public school board here. Yeah, I would bet a majority of them are union backed, or union endorsed, I should say, or they're former teachers, and were part of the union.
Or, before that.
So they get their endorsement there. And, and then when you have somebody who is not sitting on the board, they really have to be a powerhouse in order to stand up against them, right? And it could still only be, you're voting no on everything, but you're still losing that vote.
Right.
Because everybody else is voting one way. And then all you get is a bunch of board members that are just sitting around patting themselves on the back, telling each other what a great job they're doing. And there's no accountability otherwise to perform differently or to implement different things. And that's kind of been my experience with what I've witnessed.
Yeah.
And I think
Me too. And it's not just in the state of Montana. The teacher unions are very strong in other areas. But what we see in other areas is they actually, if I hear, we hear it all the time. They don't get paid enough. We're in the 25 percentile for the lower 48 states and of pay for teachers. Where's your union? Why aren't you guys striking? Why don't you?
Yeah, what's the union actually doing?
What are they doing to negotiate to have a contract? And this is where we went down to, we wish that all teachers were
private contractors.
Private contractors. Just like Mary Poppins coming into the house, man. Okay. Mary Poppins comes in, you're good to go. She sets the rules, she's got whatever, and she's an independent contractor.
Mm-hmm.
There's room for negotiations all the way through that. But for somebody with like a master's degree who walks in, I'm not going back to your stupid programs. Okay. I'll get in-serviced in my school. And we will have, you guys should be providing that anyway. And I don't need to go get another degree pretty much to teach in your state. So turning that into...
When you talk like that, you're a danger, though.
Exactly.
And you can't run for school board. What was running for school board like? For me, it was awful. And I'll probably never let you run for school board ever again.
They came after me
because
my
it
business.
It was so vicious.
But people are awful.
From people who, like, we barely know.
Don't even know them.
Yeah. And
no firsthand experience.
Yeah.
And shame on all you.
That was pretty wild.
Yeah.
I know, because it's like, these are the people educating our kids that our tax dollars are going to.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
because I'm a fighter for child and children and making sure all the IEPs are straight outside as a private business owner. Gosh, you wouldn't want me to know all about the system now, would you?
Right.
Try new things.
Try new things. Call people out.
Mm-hmm.
All the things that professional adults are supposed to do.
To improve. Yes.
Yeah.
And, I wanted to say another thing, too. When the transportation and no liberty and freedom of picking schools is because of the transportation problem. If the school districts would stop worrying, and the board would stop worrying about baseball teams and everything else, and actually get a fleet of buses, we could close probably half the elementary schools here and make them a little bit bigger.
I can't believe we have, 13?
13 elementary schools at 68,000 people. Anybody out there, does that make business sense to you? Let alone, it is run like a business. School districts are run like a business. Does that make any sense to you? It'd be best to consolidate, at least 4 of those. And
I would think so too.
And have and get a bus fleet. Tell the people up here that, make gasoline that we need them for our schools.
So the article closes by saying the call for education choice in many ways is a cry to exit the rigid district system run by local school boards that generally fail to coalesce around or even articulate a clear mission. And therefore,
I don't think they have a clear mission.
Fall short of focusing on the one thing that is essential to their purpose, to responsibly use the resources they have to improve student outcomes. So McCluskey closes by saying, quote, "We have a paradox of public schooling in America, schooling controlled by government to serve a free people." End quote.
Yep. If you guys would all get unslaved, we would have this type of society that would run with liberty in mind of it, meaning your jobs and everything. What's more important, our youth of our future, or our jobs and paying 40% in taxes and then paying 70% in income or property taxes? And then you can't tell them that you're going to hold your taxes because your schools are failing and all of that. You can't tell the board that. You can't tell anybody else that. They'll come take your house. So what is the decision the society is going to make? It's going to be interesting to see. I might be dead and gone before they figure it out.
But we're already seeing a huge increase in homeschoolers. We're seeing a huge increase, and this is nationwide too.
It is nationwide. Yes,
where we're seeing pod schools. I wish we would have coined the phrase, but awesome. Darn it. At least we arrived at it on our own. But those are popping up all over, especially on the East Coast and in the South. Those are becoming, families are wanting change. They want to know that their kid's going to be okay in the future and not just getting lost in the sea of everyone else.
Yeah, and when you open up that pod school like that, they're a lot smaller, obviously, and you can have a little bit more of them. But what it also does is it shuts down, these big buildings, especially in places like Great Falls, that still run on boilers. They still run on old stuff that needs to be rebuilt. It needs to be pulled out of there, and modernizing their schools to run efficiently is huge. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
putting them in, I think a lot of our charter schools, I remember, were putting Kmart's back east. They
Yeah.
would take the Kmart's that were closing, and people would start it from scratch with like 4 or 5 rooms, but they have this 60,000 square foot building.
Yeah.
It's just a warehouse, and then they put walls up, and they started building them that way. Like, that was like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you can, because it doesn't have to be in a school building
No.
to
No.
educate.
No.
And you don't need you don't need a lot of the things that we're told that we need in order to educate either.
Right. Right.
I've told you that when I was thinking about going into teaching, and I had this thought like, well, who are some of the best teachers in history? And I thought of, well, Jesus, and he taught on a hilltop. he taught, he was just sitting outside, you
had the higher ground.
yeah, we've gotten into this idea that we need more stuff and we need more methods
and
we need more curriculum, right? So we need more money to fund those things, and we really don't. It's pretty. Kids are usually pretty happy with basics,
right?
From my experience, like the less the better. If we want those imaginations unlocked, you have to let them be bored.
Here's
kind of the thing.
Yeah, sorry to say, but here's another thing: pensions.
Yeah.
If you go solo and you become your own contractor, right? It scares the heck out of a lot of people. It scares the living hell out of them because, a pension. I remember Lancaster School District had a pension, and my mom was on the pension. And they don't teach to the pension, but they teach to the pension. Like, you're 25 and out. They stay 35, some of them. But they continuously have to pay those pensions. Like, the last superintendent that just left, I watched them with a brand new freaking camper and a brand new Chevy truck. And their pensions are $100 and some odd $1,000 for the next 15, 16, 17, 18 years. You can run a district on one superintendent and a vice superintendent. The schools itself, with the principals, and I learned this in my master's program for administration. If I've got a good set in each school, right, and I got a good assistant principal and a principal, and they're running what they need to be running, I don't need anything. You don't need me. You don't. Your schools can run with autonomy. Oh, but it's the pensions.
So how can we do... Well, I think if there wasn't that pension system in place, though, we'd really be in trouble. I don't think
None of the charter schools have any pensions across the country. They've gotten away with pensions. They've knocked them down. They've saved billions of dollars for not paying pensions. Taking that sucker away from all of those people, they have to generation them out, right? So the next ones are going to retire next year, whichever. We'll say you're grandfathered in, but there's going to be no more pensions. The city and the towns cannot afford them. They bring them down. So the hundreds of thousands of teachers that are teaching in charter schools don't have a pension.
And then you run also into the tenured teacher issue, where they're burnt out and they're just kind of there because they're tenured and they're not giving their full, and which is another issue that I think a lot of people
and I could be tenured in
have an example
in Buffalo's city schools where I cut my teeth. If I was in for 6 or 7, if you're in with good standing, you get tenured. You can reach that. That was like their incentive to keep
at 6 years.
At like 6 years, 6, 7 years. Somebody else out there can correct me on that, but I think if you stayed with the schools and you stayed where you were, sometimes they would offer.
I'm sure they've changed that since then, though.
Well,
they would have had to
way back.
That's crazy.
But that's seriously what it was. I was gonna stay. Yeah, country boy staying all the way through. in city schools, but it was
Because you get burnt out of there in
yeah, doing 5 years in the gang sides and in the east side of Buffalo is like doing 10 years. So you
that's
deserve it.
if it is the 6 years, because statistically, they know that new teachers coming in will be there for 5 years,
right,
before they're done.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be interesting if they're doing it after in that 6 to 10 year range to, yeah, because
keep from rotating.
Oh my gosh,
right?
What a mess.
Those are messes. But towns of this size can be cleaned pretty quickly.
So, I mean, how can we do more with less are kind of the questions that come to my mind. Because we're going to have to. It's going to get to a point where we don't have...
Not one of your schools, not one of your schools would not be funded. Your population, when they're healthy, would drop off tons of school supplies. The Walmarts would still be running.
Yeah.
The Kmarts and everybody else and the Targets that they buy all of their little silly school supplies from, and they march on in with their little list.
Little lists? They're like 2-page long.
Yeah, now they're longer.
Supplies.
Right. When I was a kid, they weren't that. Yeah, they weren't that freaking long. When I was a kid.
We didn't have school supplies.
Shame on you guys.
It was.
You want them socialize all school districts too.
Yeah.
They would donate. There's people who have forgotten how to trust each other and know that.
And we've said all, and it's because we're living in the fear of the ones who would not do that, and the people who have to pick up the slack for a kid that is coming from a place of nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And they're trying to keep that class division down. So I can see how we got to this point.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you and I talk all the time. Oh my gosh, if public school funding was just cut off and people really just had to be responsible for taking care of their kids' schools.
Yeah, all of your schools went down and there was still a place to teach. There'd be all the teachers that left the schools, they'd be self-contracting, okay, and they would still be teaching. They would come out of the woodwork, and we would do that so you could, the shoemaker would make me some shoes, or the next person that knows how to weld does whichever. The healthy community would do that. You need your car fixed? Not a problem, right? I mean, we've gotten so far from liberty and so far.
Well,
from
can we
scared.
do something like that in cities of this size?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would cut all of the funding in half.
I guess that's why we have districts, right?
That's why we have districts.
And then if you hear that another district is struggling, then you pony up and go help that struggling district do what they need to do.
Exactly.
So.
And it boosts everybody up. And I would guarantee you they would knock down about 4 or 5 of these schools because people are like, we're not maintaining all of those. We're consolidating.
Yep.
And they're a lot safer that way too.
Yep. And parents would have more power.
Yes, they would.
Over what's going.
Yes.
What's
just
happening.
A hypothesis.
So.
It's just a hypothesis.
So, I know that it's a touchy subject. Apparently, it's a very touchy subject in this area, for what we've seen from the elections themselves. I hope that we can create a more open conversation about education in the community and not feel like we're going to be shut down, or that if parents go in feeling like they're going to be shut down, or that they're going to get the white coat syndrome of, we're the professionals, you're just the parent, so we know what we're doing. Because if we can get past all of that, I really think that there's a chance that these schools could start thriving again.
I think so.
But we're not there right now, and it's not merely a money issue.
Yeah.
But that's my hope. I would like to urge our listeners to make sure you're getting involved when those school board elections pop up. Because whether or not you have kids, whether or not they are in one of the public schools, even if you're in a private school, you are still paying taxes toward the public school system.
Right. You don't get to bail out when you're in private.
Yeah, you are still you're still a stakeholder.
A stakeholder
in the community that you live in and how that education's being handled. So I hope that
Tell us what you think.
you get involved. Yeah, if you have any thoughts about anything we talked about today or school boards in general, you can email us your thoughts at teacherscursepod@gmail.com. If you are interested in any of the services that Go and Grow Education Services, our business, has to offer, you can go to gogrowtutor.com and you can contact us from there. But I think that this was a really good deep dive topic to start off with. I think that it's something that speaks to a lot of people and is in fact relevant to each and every one of you, whether you want it to be or not. It does affect you. So make sure you're paying attention, and thank you so much for listening to The Teacher's Curse. I'm Annie.
And I'm Kevin.
Leather Barrels out.